At my daughter's wedding, they sat me next to the restroom. You're too poor to sit with everyone else, whispered the groom. I sat there alone and humiliated when suddenly a man in a black suit sat down next to me. Let's pretend we're old friends, he said quietly. At that moment, my son saw us together, and his face turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost, because this man in a black suit could destroy everything they had hidden me near the toilet, with a single word. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Dad, I need to talk to you about the wedding. Jennifer's voice had that edge I'd learned to recognize over the years, the tone she used when she wanted something. She stood by my kitchen counter, her engagement ring catching the February afternoon light that filtered through my worn curtains. Michael leaned against the doorframe behind her, arms crossed, already bored. I sat at my small dining table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold. Of course, sweetheart, whatever you need. She exchanged a glance with Michael. Something passed between them, some silent agreement I wasn't part of. Christopher's family is, well, they're used to a certain lifestyle. She touched the edge of my counter, her fingers trailing across the laminate like she was checking for dust. The wedding's going to be high profile. There'll be business associates, important people. That's wonderful, I smiled, remembering her as a little girl, twirling in my classroom after school, telling everyone her dad was the smartest person alive. I'm so happy for you, Jennifer. Right, happy, that's good. She walked to the window, her expensive coat, probably $400, maybe more, shifting with each step. But here's the thing, I need your help. Anything. I need you to adjust how you present yourself. The words landed strange, like they were in the wrong order. Adjust? Michael stirred from his position by the door. Come on, Jen. Just say it straight. She turned back to me, and her face had that determined set I recognized from when she was 16, arguing for a later curfew. I need you to pretend you're more successful than you are. Just for the wedding. Just for one day. My hands started shaking. I set the mug down carefully. What are you asking me to do? Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. She moved back to the table, sat across from me. Christopher's father owns 3 car dealerships. His mother sits on charity boards. They're going to ask about you, about what you did, whatever. I was a teacher. My voice came out quiet. I taught history for 37 years. See, that's exactly what I mean. Michael pushed off from the doorframe, his new watch, at least $300, glinting as he gestured. You say teacher, and people think, maybe say you were in education management instead. That's technically true. You manage classrooms, students, curricula. I looked at my son. When had he learned to twist words like that? It's my wedding day, Dad. Jennifer reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. My special day. Can't you just do this one thing for me? One thing. The phrase echoed in my head. I thought about 5 years ago. Working double shifts, tutoring kids after school 4 nights a week, canceling my trip to see the Grand Canyon. $35,000 for her graduate tuition at Portland State. She'd hugged me so tight when she got accepted, told me I was the best father in the world. I don't understand why you need me to lie. It's not lying exactly. Michael sat down in the third chair, making himself comfortable like this was a negotiation. It's just framing things better. You were in education management. You live in Southeast Portland. That's true. No need to mention it's a studio apartment. You're retired now. That's completely accurate. After everything I've done for you both? After everything? Jennifer's voice went sharp. Dad, that's not fair. We're grateful for everything. That's why I'm asking you to do this. If you really love me, you'll help me fit in with Christopher's family. You'll make this easier, not harder. I stared at her. The light through the window lit up one side of her face, left the other in shadow. I tried to find the little girl who used to wait for me outside my classroom, who'd grab my hand and tell me about her day. She wasn't there anymore. You want me to pretend I'm someone I'm not. I want you to be there for me. Her voice cracked, and I hated how good she was at this, how she knew exactly which emotion to deploy. Is that so much to ask? One day, a few hours. You don't even have to say much. Just let me introduce you the right way. Michael leaned back in his chair. Dad, You know how these things work. Appearances matter. Jen's not asking you to change who you are. Just present better. Present better. Like I was a project that needed polish. I thought about 3 years ago, Michael coming to this same table, asking for $8,000 to start a business. 6 months? Tops, and I'll pay you back with interest. He'd never mentioned it again, never even acknowledged it happened. There's a men's warehouse on 82nd Avenue, Jennifer continued, sensing weakness. Get something in charcoal or navy, nothing cheap looking. I'll give you $800 for it, and before the wedding I want to bring Christopher by to meet you. We'll need to clean up the apartment a bit, maybe put away some of these. She gestured vaguely at my walls, at the framed photographs of her and Michael growing up, at the bookshelves packed with history texts I'd collected over decades. You're ashamed of me. Dad, don't be dramatic. Michael again, always backing his sister when it served him. We're trying to help you. This is a good thing. You'll meet Christopher's family. They're great people. You'll probably like them. As long as I pretend to be someone else. Jennifer stood up, smoothed her skirt. Fine. You know what? Forget it. Don't come to the wedding. Stay here in your little apartment with your little life, and I'll tell Christopher my father couldn't make it. Would that be better? The words hit like a physical blow. I looked up at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? She was crying now, or pretending to. I couldn't tell anymore. I'm trying to start a new life. Christopher is good to me. His family has connections that could help Michael and me both. This is important, Dad. Why can't you see that? I thought about my wife, gone 7 years now. What would she say if she could see this? Would she tell me to hold my ground, or would she say to give in, to keep the peace, to sacrifice one more time for our children? My shoulders slumped. Fine. Fine what? I'll do it. The words tasted like ash. I'll be whoever you need me to be. Jennifer's face brightened instantly, the tears vanishing like they'd never existed. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this. It's going to be beautiful. You'll see. She hugged me quickly, a transaction completed. Michael was already checking his phone. I'll text you the details about meeting Christopher's parents, Jennifer said, heading for the door. Probably next week. And remember, education management, comfortable retirement, Southeast Portland. Keep it vague. Keep it positive. They left together. I heard Michael's car start in the parking lot below. I walked to the window, watched them drive away in his new sedan. Something German. Probably cost more than I made in a year of teaching. The apartment felt emptier than it had before they arrived. I sat back down at the table. 3 coffee mugs sat there, mine barely touched, theirs drained. I stared at them for a long time, trying to understand how I'd raised 2 people who looked at me and saw something that needed to be hidden. The light was fading by the time I could move again. Not physically. I'd gotten up twice, once to the window, once to the bathroom. But mentally, my thoughts kept circling back to Jennifer's face when she'd said, pretend, to Michael's casual cruelty wrapped in reasonable words. The 3 coffee mugs still sat on the table. I should wash them. Should make dinner. Should do any of the normal things a person does on a Tuesday evening in February. Instead, I walked to my bookshelf and picked up the framed photo from Jennifer's college graduation. She wore her cap and gown, her arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning. I remember that day she'd introduced me to her professors, told them I was the reason she'd made it through. My dad always believed in me, she'd said. I set the photo down and picked up another. Michael's wedding, 4 years ago. I'd taken out a personal loan for that, $12,000 at 8% interest, because he'd said his future in-laws expected a certain standard. I'd believed him then, believed it was an investment in his happiness. The loan took me 2 years to pay off. I moved to my desk, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account. The numbers stared back at me in cold blue text. Checking account, 47. Savings account, $15,000. That savings represented everything, my entire safety net, accumulated over 7 years of careful retirement living. My pension came in at $2,800 a month. Rent took $1,400. Utilities, groceries, basics. It all added up fast. I wasn't poor, not exactly. But I wasn't comfortable either. $800 for a suit. More than a quarter of 1 month's income. I clicked through to Men's Warehouse. Looked at the rental options. Charcoal or navy. Jennifer had said, nothing cheap-looking. The irony wasn't lost on me. Spending money I didn't have to look like I had money I didn't have. My phone sat on the desk beside the laptop. I picked it up, opened my messages, started typing to Jennifer. "I've been thinking about what you asked." I deleted it, started again. "Can we talk about this more? I'm not sure." Deleted that too. What would I say? That it hurt? She knew it hurt? That it was wrong? She didn't care. That I'd spent my entire adult life teaching my children to be honest, to value character over appearance, and now they wanted me to perform the opposite? I set the phone down. 7 years ago, when my wife died, I'd held Jennifer as she cried. She'd been 25, still finding her way. "I don't know how to do this without Mom," she'd whispered. I'd told her we'd figure it out together, that I'd always be there for her. I'd meant it. The memories shifted. Jennifer at 14, coming home from school, hugging me in the kitchen of our old house. "Dad, can you come to my concert tomorrow? I want all my friends to meet you. I told them my dad is the best teacher in the whole city." I'd gone, of course, sat in the auditorium with all the other parents, watched her sing in the choir, beamed with pride when she waved at me from the stage. When had that changed? When had I become someone she needed to hide? I pulled up a notepad on my computer, started typing Jennifer's instructions like they were a grocery list. Suit, Men's Warehouse, $800 story, education management professional, clean apartment before Christopher visits. Keep details vague, Southeast Portland, no specifics. The act of writing made it real. I was committing to this, to the deception, to pretending my life was something other than what it was. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I thought about calling Jennifer back, telling her I'd reconsidered, that I couldn't do this. But then what? She'd meant what she said. If I refused, I wouldn't be at the wedding. I'd lose her completely. Was that worse than losing myself? I closed the laptop, walked back to the living room. My apartment wasn't large, 700 square feet of modest living. The couch was old but clean. The curtains were faded but functional. The books on my shelves represented a lifetime of learning, of teaching, of trying to expand minds and open worlds for students who walked into my classroom. I'd been proud of this space. It was mine, paid for with my pension, filled with my memories. Now I saw it through Jennifer's eyes. Shabby, insufficient, embarrassing. I sat on the couch, let my head fall back against the cushions. Somewhere in my mind, Michael's voice echoed, 6 months, tops, and I'll pay you back with interest. I promise. That was 3 years ago. $8,000 I'd transferred without hesitation because my son needed help. He'd never paid back a cent, never even acknowledged the debt, and yet I was going to put on a costume and play pretend for their benefit. "It's one day," I said aloud to the empty apartment. "Just one day of pretending. I've done harder things." But even as I said it, I knew something had broken. Not suddenly, nothing that dramatic. But there was a crack now, a small fissure in the foundation of how I understood my relationship with my children. They saw me as a problem to be managed. I picked up my phone again, opened the Men's Warehouse website, found the location on 82nd Avenue. They were open until 7 on weekdays. I could go tomorrow after lunch, get fitted, pick something appropriate. Charcoal or navy, nothing cheap looking. I added it to my calendar. Wednesday, 2 p.m., suit rental. My jaw tightened as I typed. Not anger, not yet. Something else. A small, hard seed of recognition that this wouldn't be the last thing they'd ask me to compromise. Jennifer's wedding was just the beginning. Soon there would be Christopher's family events, holidays where I'd need to maintain the illusion, grandchildren who'd be taught to see their grandfather through a lens of manufactured respectability. Unless I said no. But I wouldn't say no. That wasn't who I was. I was the father who gave, who sacrificed, who showed up even when it cost him everything. I set the phone down on the coffee table, stared at the blank television screen. My reflection looked back at me, distorted and gray. "You're doing the right thing," I whispered to that reflection. "It's her wedding. You do this because you love her." The reflection didn't answer, didn't agree or disagree, just stared back with tired eyes that had seen too much, given too much, and somehow still had more to give. Outside, the February evening had turned fully dark. Somewhere across Portland, Jennifer was probably telling Christopher about how well the conversation went, how her father had agreed to everything. Michael was probably at some bar, already forgetting about the afternoon, and I sat alone in my small apartment, committed to a lie I didn't want to tell, for children who'd learned to take everything and offer nothing in return. Tomorrow, I'd rent the suit. Tomorrow, I'd start becoming someone else. 2 weeks crawled by after I made that appointment. I rented the suit, $800 that made my checking account wince. I practiced my lines in the bathroom mirror like an actor preparing for opening night. Education management, curriculum oversight, program development. The words felt like marbles in my mouth. Jennifer communicated through text. Brief, clinical. Dinner March 8th, 7 p.m. Le Pigeon downtown. Wear the suit. Be there 6:55 sharp. So there I stood at 6:50 on a cold March evening, outside a restaurant I'd never have entered on my own. Through the window I could see exposed brick walls, candlelit tables, couples leaning close over wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. The warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk felt like it was meant for other people. I checked my reflection in the glass. The charcoal suit fit well enough, but it didn't fit me. I adjusted my tie for the third time, took a breath that did nothing to steady my hands, and pushed through the door. Jennifer waved from a center table. She was already seated with Christopher and two people who could only be his parents, polished, confident, occupying space like they owned it. I approached, my shoes feeling too loud against the hardwood floor. "Dad!" Jennifer stood, kissed my cheek quickly. Her smile was tight, a warning disguised as welcome. "This is Christopher and his parents, Richard and Patricia Benjamin." Richard's handshake was firm, assessing, the grip of a man who'd learned to judge people in seconds. "Barney, pleasure to finally meet you. Jennifer speaks so highly of her father." The feeling's mutual. I shook Patricia's extended hand. She air-kissed near both my cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. Christopher half stood, nodded. "Good to meet you, sir." But his eyes slid away from mine, already evaluating, already forming conclusions. We sat. A server materialized with menus thick as textbooks. I scanned the prices. $45 to $85 per entree. My weekly grocery budget on a single plate. "Order whatever you like," Richard said, waving his hand expansively. "We're celebrating." The conversation started safe. Weather. Portland's recent rain. Traffic downtown. Then Richard leaned back, his wine glass balanced perfectly in his hand, and the interrogation began. "So, Barney, Jennifer mentioned you had quite the career in education. Tell us about that." I'd rehearsed this. I had my lines. "I spent my career in education management, curriculum development, program oversight, working with teachers to improve student outcomes." Technically true. Deliberately vague. "Fascinating," Patricia said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "And where are you living these days?" Jennifer mentioned Southeast Portland. That area's seen quite the boom. Property values must be impressive. "I have a place there, yes. Modest but comfortable." "Have you considered selling?" Richard again, leaning forward now. "Market's hot. Good time to capitalize on equity?" "I rent, actually." A pause. Just a beat, but I felt it. Patricia's smile didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. "Smart man," Richard recovered smoothly. "Liquidity is important. Speaking of which, what's your investment strategy these days? Stocks? Bonds? Real estate holdings elsewhere?" Jennifer's foot pressed against mine under the table. A warning, stay on script. But something inside me cracked. Not anger, disgust. Overwhelming, stomach-turning disgust at the performance, at the careful lies, at pretending my life was anything other than what it was. I set down my fork. "I need to be honest." My voice came out calm, the teacher voice I'd used for 37 years when a student needed to hear truth. "There's been a misunderstanding. I wasn't in education management. I was a high school history teacher. I don't have investment portfolios or property holdings. What I earned, I spent on my children, on making sure they had opportunities I never did." Silence dropped like a stage curtain. Richard's expression went carefully neutral. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. Christopher's jaw tightened visibly. Jennifer's face drained of color, her knuckles white around her napkin, Well, Patricia's voice could have frosted glass. That's certainly admirable. Very noble, Richard added, but the word came out like an insult. The conversation lurched forward, but everything had changed. They spoke around me now, directing questions to Jennifer, discussing topics I couldn't contribute to. Patricia asked about honeymoon destinations. Christopher showed photos of houses on his phone. Their future home, he called it, though I'd later learn it was rented at $3,500 a month. Richard mentioned his 3 thriving car wash locations and their expansion plans. The subtext was clear. We have wealth, we are successful, you are not. I sat through 4 courses I couldn't taste. Seared duck, roasted vegetables arranged like art, a chocolate dessert that probably took hours to prepare. Each bite was ash. When Richard paid the check, not offering to split it, not asking for my contribution, I felt the full weight of my irrelevance. In the parking lot behind the restaurant, cold air bit through the suit jacket. Jennifer walked ahead quickly, her heels clicking sharp against the pavement. I followed. Christopher and his parents had already driven away. She spun on me, and her face was something I'd never seen before. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage. You ruined everything, her voice shook. Why? Why couldn't you just keep quiet? Just sit there and nod and let them think. Think what? That I'm someone I'm not? Yes. She was crying now, but not from sadness, from frustration, from shame. Is that so impossible? One dinner, Dad, a few hours of pretending. But no, you had to be honest. You had to embarrass me in front of Christopher's family. I'm not ashamed of what I am, Jennifer. Well, maybe you should be. The words came out like a slap. Maybe if you'd cared more about success and less about being noble, we wouldn't be in this situation. Maybe if you'd saved money instead of throwing it away on us, you'd have something to show for your life. I stood there, hands in the pockets of the rented suit, letting her words hit me. What could I say? That I'd worked 2 jobs to pay her tuition? That I'd canceled vacations, eaten cheap food, worn old clothes so she could have new ones? She knew all that. She just didn't care. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I tried. Not hard enough. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara. Just forget it. I need to go. She got in her car, something new, something German I didn't recognize, and drove away without looking back. I stood alone in the parking lot for a long time. Other diners came and went around me, couples laughing, groups chatting. No one noticed the old man in the rented suit, standing perfectly still while his world collapsed. At home, I hung the suit carefully. $800. I'd need the deposit back. I sat in the dark, still wearing the white dress shirt, and waited. My phone rang at 10:30. Michael. Jen called me. His voice was cold, distant. I can't believe you did that. Michael. This was her chance at a good life, Dad. Christopher's family has money, connections. She could have had everything. And you sabotaged it because of your pride. It wasn't pride. It was... Save it. A pause. Just try not to ruin the actual wedding, too. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the blank screen. Outside, Portland went on with its evening. Cars passing, sirens in the distance, life continuing for people whose children didn't despise them. The suit hung on my bedroom door, a costume for a performance that had failed. Tomorrow I'd return it, get my deposit back, resume my small life in my small apartment. But something had changed. Not in them. In me. A question formed in my mind, quiet but insistent. Why was I still trying to please people who saw me as a burden? I didn't have an answer yet. The silence that followed the dinner was deafening. I called Jennifer the next morning. She answered on the 5th ring. I can't talk right now. Click. I texted an apology, though for what, I still wasn't sure. For being honest? For existing? No response. 3 days later, I tried again. Honey, I'm sorry about the dinner. Can we talk? Hours passed. Then, too busy with wedding prep. I stopped trying. March became a study in absence. My phone sat on the kitchen counter like an artifact from a dead civilization. I picked it up compulsively, checked for messages that never came, set it back down. Jennifer's texts, when they arrived, were purely logistical. Wedding April 18th, the Nines Hotel downtown, 200 guests. Ceremony, 4 p.m., Reception 6 p.m. No, I love you. No, hope you can make it. Just coordinates for an event I was obligated to attend. I asked about the dress code. She replied, formal. I offered money. Anything, even 1,000 from my savings. Everything is paid for by the Benjamin family. Just show up. Just show up. As if that was all I was good for. Michael's silence ran parallel. I called twice. Both calls went to voicemail. Just checking in, son. Love you. No response for a week. Then a text. Busy with work. See you at wedding. They'd coordinated. My children, who used to argue about everything, had found common ground in freezing me out. The apartment became both prison and sanctuary. I walked circuits through rooms that suddenly felt too small and too empty simultaneously. Past the refrigerator, where Jennifer's childhood artwork still clung to the door, finger paintings from 28 years ago, faded and curling. Past the shelf holding Michael's Little League trophy. I'd coached his team for 3 years, giving up my Saturday mornings. I pulled out photo albums I hadn't opened in months. Jennifer's high school graduation. She'd been valedictorian. Full scholarship offers from 3 universities. I'd sat front row, tears streaming down my face, thinking, we did it. She made it. That was also my 25th work anniversary. The school had planned a ceremony, a plaque presentation, cake in the teacher's lounge. I'd skipped it. Jennifer's graduation was the same afternoon, and there was never any question which mattered more. Another photo. Michael at 22, standing beside a used Honda Civic. I remembered that day. He'd called me crying 2 weeks earlier. Totaled his car, no insurance money, unemployment running out. I can't get to job interviews without a car, Dad. I'm so sorry. I'd taken a personal loan, $6,000 at 9% interest, ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for months to make the payments. He'd hugged me when I handed him the keys, promised to pay me back as soon as I'm on my feet. That was 13 years ago. The loan was long paid off. Michael never contributed a cent. I flipped to my 60th birthday photo. 3 years ago. I'd mentioned weeks in advance that I hoped we could have a small dinner together. The day came. Both children texted around noon. Swamped with work, Dad? Rain check? I'd heated a frozen dinner, eaten alone, gone to bed at 8. 1 week before the wedding, a heavy cream envelope appeared in my mailbox. The invitation was beautiful. Gold embossing, elegant calligraphy, cardstock thick enough to build houses with. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Benjamin request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Christopher Michael. Benjamin, to Miss Jennifer Marie Butler. I read it 3 times. I was the bride's father, yet I was being formally invited like a distant cousin. My name appeared nowhere, not as host, not even in acknowledgement. This was a Benjamin wedding. Jennifer was simply the bride being acquired. I propped the invitation on my kitchen counter, where I saw it every morning while making coffee. A beautiful reminder of my irrelevance. Despite everything, the coldness, the rejection, the formal invitation that treated me like a stranger, I wanted to give Jennifer something meaningful, something that said, I'm still your father. I still love you. Maybe material things spoke louder than words in her new world. I drove to Hawthorne Boulevard on a Thursday afternoon. The district was lined with boutiques and cafes I'd never entered, shops selling artisanal goods to people with artisanal incomes. The antique store sat between a pottery studio and a wine bar. Inside, surrounded by objects from other people's pasts, I searched. Vintage jewelry seemed impersonal, furniture too presumptuous. Then I saw the clock, brass and mahogany, crafted in the 1940s, with Roman numerals and a face that had aged into character. I picked it up, turned the key. The mechanism caught, began to tick. Steady, reliable, built to last. That's a quality piece, the shop owner said. He was maybe 50, gray beard, kind eyes. Built to last generations. It's for my daughter's wedding. His smile was genuine. She'll treasure it. These pieces hold their value, monetary and sentimental both. I hope so, I said quietly. $500, nearly 20% of my monthly pension. I paid in cash, bills I'd withdrawn from the ATM specifically for this purpose. The owner wrapped it carefully in brown paper and bubble wrap. At home, I rewrapped it in expensive paper from a craft store, $12, more than I'd usually spend. I tied it with silk ribbon, attached a card in my careful handwriting. To Jennifer and Christopher, may your life together be as timeless as this clock. Love always, Dad. I practiced what I'd say when I gave it to her. Would she even open it at the wedding? Would she thank me in front of Christopher's family? Or would my gift be quietly shuffled aside, an embarrassment she'd deal with later? The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed. Jennifer, please just come tomorrow and don't draw attention, thanks. I read it 3 times, searching for warmth that wasn't there. Not, I love you, Dad. Not, I'm glad you'll be there. Just instructions for managing a problem guest. I set the phone down beside the wrapped clock on my dining table. In my bedroom, I'd laid out tomorrow's clothes. The same suit from the dinner. I'd rented it again. Another $800 I couldn't afford. Polished shoes, conservative tie. Everything was ready. I was ready. But for what? To be tolerated? To be managed? To sit quietly in whatever corner they'd assign me and watch my daughter marry into a family that measured worth in bank statements? I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. The clock in the living room, my old wall clock, not the gift, ticked through the darkness. Each second was one closer to tomorrow, to an event that filled me with dread rather than joy. Through my bedroom window, moonlight touched the wrapped gift on the table. $500 of hope that maybe, somehow she still loved me underneath the shame. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. The wedding day arrived with gray Portland skies that matched my mood perfectly. I woke at 6, though I'd barely slept. My older charcoal suit hung on the closet door, not rented this time, just pressed and presentable despite its age. I spent an hour on preparation, polished my shoes until they gleamed, at least from a distance, tied my tie 3 times before it sat right, checked my reflection with the critical eye of someone who knows judgment is coming. The wrapped clock sat in its gift bag by the door. $500 of hope. I drove downtown, parked in the Nines Hotel garage. $25 for the day. I noted it mentally, another expense I couldn't quite afford but would pay anyway. The elevator rose to the event floor. The doors opened onto opulence I'd only seen in magazines, white orchids in crystal vases, chandeliers catching light like frozen waterfalls, champagne flowing on silver trays carried by servers in crisp uniforms. 200 guests in designer clothes moved through the space with the casual confidence of people who belonged. I tightened my grip on the gift bag and stepped into the reception area. Near the ballroom entrance stood an ornate seating chart, gilded frame, elegant calligraphy listing names and table assignments. I approached, running my finger down the alphabetical listing. Butler, Barney, table 18. My stomach dropped. Through the open ballroom doors, I could see table 18 in the far back corner, 3 meters from the restroom doors, poorly lit compared to the front tables, bathed in chandelier glow. Tables 1 through 6 near the head table were clearly reserved for family and VIPs. I could read the place cards from here. Table 5 listed Michael and Amanda Butler. My own son sat 15 tables closer to his sister than I did. I walked through the ballroom, weaving between tables already set with crystal and gold-rimmed china. Nobody acknowledged me. Guests clustered in groups, laughing, raising champagne flutes. I was invisible, a background figure in someone else's celebration. At table 18 I found my place card, Mr. Barney Butler, in elegant script. The other names at the table meant nothing. Strangers, distant Benjamin family acquaintances based on the surnames. No family, no friends. I sat, placed the gift bag carefully under my chair, out of sight. What was the point of displaying a gesture no one would notice? From my corner I watched the room's dynamics unfold. The head table sparkled with attention. Richard and Patricia Benjamin held court near the bar, surrounded by admirers. Christopher moved through the crowd in his designer tuxedo, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. Michael stood with a champagne flute, laughing at something Richard said, clinking glasses like they were old friends. Jennifer appeared in her white pre-reception dress, hair styled in elaborate waves, makeup flawless. She moved from group to group, accepting hugs, glowing with joy. Our eyes met once across the 40 feet separating us. She looked away quickly. Neither of my children approached to greet me. Servers passed my table periodically, heading to or from the restrooms. Some glanced at me with mild curiosity. Who was this older man sitting alone in the corner? Before continuing, I kept my eyes down, trying to occupy as little space as possible. Christopher appeared during the cocktail hour, holding champagne, his smile calculated and cold. "Barney!" He gestured at my table. "Hope the location works for you?" I looked up at him. "Table 18, quite far from the family tables." "Well, we had to arrange seating by—" He paused, selecting his words carefully. "By status. I mean by how well guests know each other." "You mean because of my financial situation?" I met his eyes directly. "Because I'm poor." His laugh was nervous, sharp. "Let's say our guests are accustomed to certain conversational levels. Investments, business ventures, that sort of thing." He leaned in slightly. "You said it yourself at dinner. You're a simple teacher." "I'm Jennifer's father." "Right." He was already stepping back, already dismissing me. "Just enjoy the celebration. Try not to upset Jennifer, okay?" He walked away before I could respond, already greeting other guests with more warmth than he'd shown me. I sat alone, glass of water in hand. I hadn't touched the champagne, couldn't risk appearing drunk or unprofessional, even now, even when professionalism clearly didn't matter. Michael glanced my direction once from across the room. Our eyes met. He looked away, took a drink, continued his conversation with Richard Benjamin. Amanda, his wife, chatted animatedly with Patricia near the head table. Even she'd been absorbed into the Benjamin family circle, while I sat in exile. A server refilled my water glass. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" "No, thank you. This is fine." She smiled kindly. "Let me know if you need anything. It's a beautiful wedding." "Yes, beautiful." She moved on, and I realized that was my warmest interaction of the evening. Two guests passed my table, heading to the restrooms, their conversation carrying back to me. "Who's that man sitting alone back there?" "Not sure. Maybe a distant relative?" "Poor soul, looks lonely." They didn't know I could hear them. Maybe they didn't care. I looked at my hands on the table, weathered, veined, the hands of a 63-year-old man who'd spent his life giving everything to children who'd grown into strangers. $500 for a clock they'd probably never wind. $35,000 for graduate school Jennifer never mentioned anymore. $800 for a suit rental, so I could pretend to be someone else at a dinner that ended in humiliation. How much did it cost to be worth a decent seat at your own daughter's wedding? More than I'd ever have. The ballroom began to fill as the ceremony approached. Guests moved to their assigned tables, adjusting chairs, settling in. The head table remained empty. The wedding party would enter after the ceremony, but the prime tables filled with laughter and conversation. Table 18 remained mostly empty except for me. I sat there holding my water glass, watching my children at the front of the room. They were part of a different world now, a world where I was an embarrassment to be hidden, a problem to be managed, an obstacle between guests and their destinations. Then I heard a chair scrape beside me. Someone was sitting down. I looked up, expecting another stranger assigned to my exile, another person who'd spend the evening wishing they'd been seated anywhere else. Instead, I saw a man approximately my age settling into the adjacent chair. Expensive black suit, kind eyes, a warm smile that seemed genuine in a room full of calculated expressions. "This seat taken?" he asked. "Mind if I pretend we're old friends? This corner looks too lonely for a celebration." I stared at the stranger, startled. Throughout the entire evening, no one had voluntarily approached me. Sure." I gestured at the empty chair. "Though I should warn you, this isn't exactly the prestigious section." He settled in, placed his glass on the table. Expensive whiskey, I noticed, not champagne. His suit whispered wealth, rather than shouted it. Something about his face seemed familiar. "Have we met?" He studied me closely. "You look familiar." I looked at him more carefully. The shape of his face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the cadence of his voice. Recognition hit like electricity. "Robert? Robert Thomas? From Portland State?" His face lit up. "Barney Butler. I can't believe it. How long has it been?" 20 years at least, since you moved to Seattle. Closer to 22. He stood, and I rose to meet him. We embraced, a real hug between old friends, not the air-kiss politeness I'd watched all evening. Several guests glanced over, curious about the emotional display at table 18. We sat back down, and I felt genuine warmth for the first time since arriving. "You look good, friend," Robert said. "Still have that teacher energy about you." "Still a teacher. Well, retired now." I managed to smile. "You clearly did better than I did." Robert waved off the compliment, but his suit and watch told the story his modesty wouldn't. This was a man who'd succeeded in ways I'd never imagined. Then his expression shifted as he looked around the ballroom. "Wait, why are you back here?" He gestured at the ornate front tables, the head table setup. "Barney, you're the bride's father. Where's the family table?" "This is my assignment, table 18. "That's insane. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I interrupted, unable to keep the bitter edge from my voice. "Just priorities. Different priorities than I have." Robert's jaw tightened. He was a businessman now, trained to read situations quickly. He didn't push for details, but I saw understanding and anger flash across his features. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "I'm here because Richard Benjamin invited me. Will has been hounding me for months about investing in his businesses, his car washes. 3 locations, all struggling." Robert leaned closer, his voice dropping. "He's leveraged beyond reason, Barney. Bank debt over $340,000. Needs at least $200,000 in fresh capital to survive the next year." I absorbed this information slowly. "Does he know you're undecided?" "He knows I'm evaluating." Robert's eyes scanned the room again. The opulent decorations, the expensive champagne, the lavish display. Tonight was supposed to impress me. Show me stable family values, business acumen. He paused, his gaze returning to our isolated corner. Seating the bride's father by the restroom doesn't exactly convey family values. Across the ballroom, I noticed Michael moving. He'd been near the bar, but now he was edging closer to our table, his face pale. His drink hung forgotten in his hand, his entire focus on our conversation. "Your son?" Robert followed my gaze. "Yes, Michael." "He looks concerned about something." I watched Michael shift position again, trying to get closer without being obvious. Amanda touched his arm, said something. He brushed her off without looking at her. "Robert," I said carefully, "tell me more about Richard's situation. What exactly would your investment involve?" Robert studied me, curious about my sudden interest. "Full partnership, restructuring operations, family involvement in the turnaround." He paused. "Why?" "Just curious about my daughter's new family." I kept my tone casual. "I like to know where she'll be living her life." Robert didn't quite believe that was my only reason, but he continued. "Richard approached me 6 months ago. The car washes have potential, but they're poorly managed. He's made expensive expansion decisions without proper capital backing. Now he's months behind on loan payments, vendors are threatening to pull service contracts, and the whole operation is on the verge of collapse. And he needs your money to save it. He needs my money, my business connections, and my reputation." Robert's fingers drummed once on the table. "The last part matters most. If Robert Thomas invests, other investors follow. Banks extend more credit. Vendors offer better terms." I processed this, pieces clicking into place. The desperate pursuit of Robert's approval, Christopher's marriage to Jennifer as part of building a respectable family image, the seating arrangement designed to hide the poor teacher from the wealthy investor. "How much have you committed?" "Nothing yet." Robert's expression hardened slightly. "I've been avoiding it because something felt off. The numbers work on paper, but family businesses live or die on family dynamics." He glanced at Michael, who'd moved even closer, now about 20 feet away. "And after seeing how they treat you tonight, I'm inclined to walk away entirely." Michael must have heard that last part. His face went from pale to ashen. "Don't make that decision based on me," I said quietly. "Why not?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "You think I invest in people who disrespect loyalty? Who hide their own family members? That tells me everything about their character, Barney." From our right, Michael had moved close enough that I could see the panic in his eyes. He recognized Robert Thomas, must have seen his photo in Forbes, in Portland Business Journal, in financial news articles. Robert Thomas, venture capital investor, estimated net worth 40 to 50 million, one of the Pacific Northwest's most influential business figures. And he was sitting at table 18, deep in conversation with the father they'd dismissed. "Your son definitely recognizes me," Robert observed with amusement. "He manages a car dealership. He'd know who you are." "Does he know we're friends?" "He does now." Robert turned his attention back to me. "So tell me, old friend, how did you end up with a daughter marrying into this particular family?" I gave him the abbreviated version: Jennifer's engagement, the pressure to pretend, the dinner disaster, the weeks of silence leading to this wedding where I'd been assigned to the corner, like damaged furniture. Robert listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. "And you came anyway?" "She's my daughter." "Even after they put you here?" Not a question, a statement of fact. Even after. Robert was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. Then he focused on me again. "Barney, let me explain exactly what Richard proposed. Full partnership would mean restructuring the entire business. I'd have decision-making authority over operations, hiring, family roles in the company." He paused meaningfully, "including whether certain family members remain involved at all." I understood what he wasn't saying. "You'd have leverage. Considerable leverage, if I choose to use it." The ceremony music began, soft strings from speakers hidden throughout the ballroom. Guests moved to their seats. The wedding was about to start. Michael stood frozen 30 feet away, watching us, calculating whether to intervene or report this development to Christopher and the Benjamins. Robert raised his whiskey glass slightly. "To old friends who show up even when they're not wanted." I lifted my water glass. "To old friends who sit in the corner when they could sit anywhere." We touched glasses. Across the ballroom, I saw Michael finally moving, not toward us, but toward Christopher, who stood near the ceremony entrance. They spoke urgently, Christopher's eyes snapping toward table 18. "I think we've been noticed," Robert said mildly. "I think you're right." The music swelled. The ceremony was beginning. But for me, something else was beginning too. The recognition that I wasn't as powerless as they'd assumed. I had Robert's ear. Robert had leverage. And the Benjamin family desperately needed Robert's approval. The father they'd hidden by the restrooms had just become the most important person in the room. Michael didn't walk across the ballroom. He ran. His movement caught the attention of nearby guests. A groomsman abandoning his post, weaving between tables with urgent purpose. I watched from table 18 as he found Christopher near the ceremony entrance, grabbed his arm, pulled him aside. Even from 40 feet away, I could see Michael's lips moving rapidly, his hand gesturing back toward our table. Christopher's face drained of color. "Your son seems distressed," Robert observed mildly. "He just figured out who you are." "Ah," Robert took a sip of his whiskey, "and realized his family seated you here as a deliberate insult." "Something like that." Jennifer joined them, her white dress rustling as Michael pulled her into their urgent huddle. Christopher spoke rapidly, gesturing. Jennifer's confusion shifted to horror as understanding dawned. All three looked toward table 18. "Here comes the cavalry," Robert said. But it wasn't my children who arrived first. Richard Benjamin approached with his business smile firmly in place, confident stride carrying him across the ballroom. He had one hand extended toward Robert before he noticed who Robert was sitting with. His steps faltered. The smile stayed fixed, but his eyes widened fractionally. "Robert, so glad you could make it." He recovered smoothly, continuing forward. "But why are you sitting back here instead of at—" He trailed off, looking at me with barely concealed dismay. "You two know each other?" Robert stood, shook Richard's hand with less warmth than politeness required. "Know each other? Richard, Barney, and I are best friends. Have been for nearly 40 years. College roommates, actually." The words carried clearly. Nearby guests turned to look. Richard laughed nervously. "How wonderful. I had no idea you and Barney were— that you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "That we were close?" Robert's tone had an edge. "Very close. He's one of the most honest, principled people I've ever met." Christopher and Jennifer arrived at this moment, faces showing forced joy mixed with barely concealed panic. "Dad!" Jennifer's voice was too bright, too high. "Mr. Thomas, I had no idea you two knew each other." I looked at my daughter. "You never asked about my life, Jennifer. You assumed poor teachers don't have successful friends. That's not fair. Fair?" I kept my voice level, conversational. "Would you like to discuss fair, starting with table placement?" Christopher tried to intervene. "Sir, this is all a misunderstanding." The seating wasn't meant to. Wasn't meant to what? I met his eyes directly. Humiliate me? Exclude me? You said it yourself earlier. I'm too poor for proper conversation with your guests. I never said exactly. You said exactly that. Robert heard the whole story. Robert shifted his chair slightly closer to mine, a physical manifestation of alliance that everyone noticed. His expression had hardened. Barney explained the situation, the table by the restroom, your comments about his poverty, making him unsuitable for proper guest interaction, the systematic exclusion from his own daughter's wedding. Richard's panic was becoming visible. Robert, please, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Robert stood, and his voice carried across multiple nearby tables. Richard, I'm afraid I need to reconsider our upcoming business meetings. A man who doesn't respect his future daughter-in-law's father is unlikely to be a reliable business partner. Family values matter significantly in my investment decisions. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations at surrounding tables stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Richard's face went from pale to gray. Robert, no, please. This was a mistake. A seating error. Nothing more. Mistakes reveal character. Robert's tone was ice. I'll be in touch about my decision. Christopher jumped in, his voice tight. Mr. Thomas, my father has been working toward this partnership for months. You can't make a decision based on a wedding seating chart. I can make decisions based on whatever criteria I choose. Robert looked at Christopher with the same cold assessment he'd give a failing business proposal. And I choose to invest in families that value loyalty, respect, and integrity. Jennifer touched my arm. I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. She pulled back, as if burned. Dad, please, she whispered. Can we talk about this privately? We'll talk later, Jennifer. Maybe. More guests had noticed the confrontation. I could hear whispers spreading outward like ripples. That's Robert Thomas. Who's the older man? I think he's the bride's father. Why would they seat the bride's father there if he knows Robert Thomas? Patricia Benjamin appeared at her husband's elbow, her confusion evident. Richard, what's happening? Robert is reconsidering the investment, Richard said through clenched teeth. Because of seating arrangements? Her voice rose slightly. That's absurd. That's business. Robert sat back down beside me, effectively dismissing them all. Now, if you'll excuse us, Barney and I have 40 years to catch up on. The ceremony began shortly after. Jennifer and Christopher exchanged vows, but the joy had evaporated. Richard kept glancing back at table 18, where Robert and I sat talking animatedly, laughing at shared memories, displaying obvious decades-long friendship. During dinner, I noticed other guests asking questions. They'd lean toward companions, gesture subtly toward our table, receive whispered explanations. The social currency of the room had shifted. Suddenly, the man by the restroom was the most interesting person present. The Benjamins attempted multiple approaches throughout the evening. Each time, Robert and I were engrossed in conversation, reminiscing about college days, discussing Robert's business ventures, comparing notes on the decades that had passed. We weren't deliberately shutting them out. We simply had more interesting things to discuss than their crisis. My children stayed away. Michael stood near the bar, watching us with visible anxiety. Jennifer sat at the head table beside Christopher, her smile brittle, her eyes darting repeatedly to table 18. Amanda kept trying to talk to Michael, who barely acknowledged her presence. Near evening's end, as guests began departing, Robert and I stood to leave together. We'd been talking for hours, and I'd felt more respected, more valued in those hours than I had in years with my own family. Jennifer approached one final time. Dad, please, we need to talk. We'll talk later, Jennifer. Maybe. When? When you understand what you did. I looked past her to Christopher, to Michael standing nearby. All of you. Robert placed his hand briefly on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that several departing guests noticed. Ready, Barney? We walked toward the ballroom exit together. At the doorway, Robert pulled a business card from his wallet, wrote something on the back, handed it to me. My personal cell. Call me tomorrow. We should talk more. Michael was standing near the exit. He saw the exchange, his eyes tracking the card from Robert's hand to my pocket. Robert and I walked out side by side, leaving my children watching from the ballroom. Christopher stood with his arm around Jennifer, both looking shell-shocked. Richard Benjamin watched us go, his face a mask of barely controlled desperation. His business hopes were walking out the door, and he knew it. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in my apartment, still wearing my dress shirt, watching shadows move across the ceiling. My phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. Jennifer's text progressed from apologetic to desperate. "Dad, please answer. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Christopher's family is really stressed." I didn't respond to any of them. Michael called twice. Voicemail both times. Around 9 the next morning, my phone buzzed with a new name. Robert Thomas. "Coffee today. We should talk. Elite Coffee on Pearl District. 11 a.m. I texted back. "I'll be there." I showered, dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt with my blazer. Not trying to impress, just presenting myself with quiet dignity. The man in the mirror looked different than he had yesterday morning. More solid somehow, more present. Elite Coffee occupied a converted warehouse space in the Pearl District. Exposed brick, local art on walls, clientele and expensive athleisure sipping single-origin pour-overs. I spotted Robert at a corner table. 2 cups already waiting. He stood as I approached, embraced me warmly. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't, really. Too much to process." We sat. He slid 1 cup across to me. "I've been thinking all night, too. Barney, I'm furious on your behalf. How can I help? What do you need?" I wrapped my hands around the cup, feeling its warmth. "I don't want revenge. That's not who I am. But I want them to understand, to learn what respect actually means." Robert leaned back, studying me. "Richard Benjamin is desperate. He'll agree to almost anything to secure my investment. We can use that." "Use it how?" "Conditions. Requirements that make them experience consequences." He pulled out a leather portfolio, clicked open a pen. Not arbitrary punishment, logical business terms that happen to teach lessons. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Robert sketched investment structures, potential timelines, contingency plans. He explained Richard's situation in detail. 3 car wash locations, all hemorrhaging money. Bank debt over $340,000. Default timeline of 60 days without fresh capital. "Christopher works as a financial analyst," Robert said. "Makes about $120 a year. Lives comfortably while his father's business collapses." "And Jennifer benefits from that comfort?" "Exactly." Robert tapped his pen on the portfolio. "What if investment terms require Christopher's direct involvement?" "Family businesses need family commitment. He'd have to quit his current job, work in the car washes. Manager's salary would be, what, 65,000? Maybe 70. Nearly half his current income." "Nearly half. Plus I'd require operational cost optimization, which means the family downsizes from their expensive West Hills home. Move somewhere more modest. I process this. They'd hate that. They'd experience what you've experienced. Financial pressure, diminishment, loss of status." Robert met my eyes. "Is that revenge or consequences?" "Consequences," I said slowly. "Natural results of poor business decisions." "Exactly. And one more condition." Robert's expression hardened. "A formal public apology to you. At a family meeting. For the record. You think Richard will agree? He has no choice. Without my $200,000, he's bankrupt in 2 months." Robert mentioned something else then, a charitable foundation he was considering, supporting retired educators who'd sacrificed financially for their profession. "You'd be perfect as a consultant. $5,000 a month for legitimate work. You have 37 years of education experience. That expertise has value." "Robert, I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's employment." He leaned forward. 40 years ago, you lent me $50 when I couldn't make rent. You never asked for it back, never mentioned it again. That's who you are. Let me return the favor." I thought about it. $5,000 a month would nearly double my pension income. More importantly, it would demonstrate to my children that their father had value and recognition they'd never acknowledged. "All right," I said, "but I work for it. Real consulting. Real contribution. Wouldn't have it any other way." 3 days later, I sat in Stephen Parker's law office in southeast Portland. The attorney listened carefully as I explained what I wanted. A trust fund directing my savings to charitable purposes upon my death, explicitly excluding my children as beneficiaries. "They can contest this," Parker warned, "claim undue influence or diminished capacity. I'm 63, healthy, and clear-headed. Document my reasoning thoroughly. They've treated me as an ATM for decades, no more. Parker took notes. This will hurt them when they eventually learn about it. That's the point. I wrote a check for $3,000, nearly 20% of my remaining savings. My hand was steady. The weeks that followed established a pattern. My phone rang constantly. Jennifer, Michael, sometimes Christopher. I developed a system. Glance at screen, decline call, return to whatever I was doing. Occasionally I'd respond to texts with brief, cold messages. Busy with work. Can't talk now. Jennifer's messages grew more desperate. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry about everything. My response, hours later. Busy with work commitments. Maybe later. What work? Dad, please. Christopher's family is really stressed about Mr. Thomas's decision. Not my concern. You made your priorities clear. That's not fair. I love you. Then you should have seated me like you loved me. By late May, Robert arranged a formal meeting at his downtown office. Sleek space, panoramic Portland views, conference table that probably cost more than my car. Present. Richard and Patricia Benjamin, Christopher and Jennifer, and myself as Robert's advisor. Robert presented his investment terms using PowerPoint slides. Professional, impersonal. The numbers were stark. $200,000 in exchange for 40% equity and operational control. Then came the condition slide. Family involvement is non-negotiable, Robert said. Christopher will work directly in operations at market rate for car wash managers. Christopher went pale. Wait, I have to quit my job? Yes. That's a significant pay cut. It's a significant investment. Additionally, cost optimization requires residential downsizing from your current West Hills property to something more financially sustainable. Patricia's voice was sharp. You're dictating where we live? I'm requiring financial responsibility. These are standard terms for distressed business investments. Robert advanced to the next slide. Finally, family accountability requires a formal apology to Mr. Butler for his treatment during the wedding planning and ceremony. Public record, witnessed, documented. Jennifer gasped audibly. Richard stared at the projection screen, his jaw working. These terms are non-negotiable, Robert continued. Accept them or I walk away. You have until end of week to decide. The silence stretched. I could hear Patricia's breathing, rapid and shallow. Christopher's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Jennifer looked at me with something like betrayal in her eyes. Richard finally spoke, his voice tight. We accept. Excellent. My attorneys will prepare formal documents. As everyone stood to leave, Jennifer approached me. Dad, please. We'll see how you handle these changes, Jennifer. Actions matter more than apologies. I left with Robert, leaving my family to process what accepting these terms would actually mean for their lives. In the parking garage, Robert said quietly, This is just the beginning. The real test comes when they have to follow through. People can agree to anything when desperate. Living up to agreements reveals character. I nodded, knowing the hard part. Watching my children experience consequences was yet to come. Jennifer's text arrived on a Monday morning in early June. Christopher started at the car washes today. This is harder than we expected. I read it over my coffee at my dining table, the same table where I'd sat months ago processing their request to pretend. I didn't respond. The consequences I'd set in motion were playing out now, and I'd decided to let them unfold without my intervention or comfort. Over the following weeks, updates reached me through various channels. Jennifer's increasingly sparse text messages, occasional conversations with Robert, who tracked the Benjamin business situation as part of his due diligence. Even social media, Jennifer's Instagram, once filled with curated luxury shots, now showed long gaps between posts. Christopher's transition was brutal, from what I gathered. Financial analyst to car wash operations manager. Climate-controlled office to pressure washers and drainage problems. Business casual to getting soaked daily. Managing minimum wage teenagers who didn't show up for shifts. His salary had dropped from $120,000 to $65,000, nearly half his previous income. Jennifer texted me once. Christopher comes home exhausted every night. He's so angry all the time. I imagined him discovering what it meant to work hard for modest pay. The same Christopher who'd called me just a teacher, with such dismissive ease. They'd moved from their Pearl District apartment, $3,500 a month for floor-to-ceiling windows and building amenities, to something far more modest, $1,800 a month in a less fashionable neighborhood. No doorman, no gym, just basic shelter. Jennifer's lifestyle collapsed visibly. Her coworkers noticed she wore the same outfits repeatedly, brought lunch from home instead of joining their restaurant outings. When they asked if everything was okay, she made vague excuses about saving for a house. I knew the truth. She'd cut her manicure budget, $240 a month saved. No more boutique shopping. No more casual $150 dinners. Every discretionary expense scrutinized and eliminated. My consulting work with Robert's Foundation began in earnest. I met with retired teachers, reviewed grant applications, shared my expertise on curriculum development. The work was meaningful and compensated, $5,000 a month. For the first time in years, I felt valued for my knowledge rather than my willingness to open my wallet. I carried the leather portfolio Robert gifted me, introduced myself as an educational consultant with quiet pride. People listened when I spoke about pedagogy, about supporting teachers who'd given their careers to public education. Jennifer tried visiting once in July, unannounced. I met her at the door but didn't invite her in. She'd lost weight, not in a healthy way. Her hair showed visible roots where salon highlights had grown out. She wore jeans and a simple top instead of designer casual wear. She looked older than 32, exhausted in a way makeup couldn't hide. "Dad, can we talk, please?" "I'm busy, Jennifer. Preparing for a foundation meeting." "Foundation?" Confusion crossed her face. "My consulting work. I told you I was busy with work. I wasn't lying." I didn't know you actually had a job. You never asked. You assumed I was avoiding you out of spite." I kept my tone even. "I'm avoiding you because I have responsibilities now. People who value my expertise." She left shortly after. I watched from my window as she got into her car. Not the new model she'd driven at the wedding. Something older and more practical now. Robert updated me periodically on the Benjamin family situation. Patricia was quietly selling jewelry through consignment shops, trying to maintain appearances while bleeding money. Richard worked 12-hour days, looking a decade older, desperately stabilizing operations while Christopher's inexperienced management created constant crises. The family that had performed wealth so convincingly at the wedding was unraveling thread by thread. But the real destruction was in Jennifer's marriage. She texted me fragments of their fights. "Christopher blames you for everything. He says if you hadn't been so sensitive about a seating chart, none of this would have happened. We can barely speak to each other anymore." I could read between the lines. Christopher was revealing his true character under pressure. Selfish, mercenary, incapable of accepting responsibility. And Jennifer was finally seeing what I'd seen at that first dinner. A man who valued money over people, transactions over relationships. Michael's call came in mid-July. "You cut me out of your will? I'm your son." I put the phone on speaker, pulled out the notes I'd prepared for this conversation. "Yes, and for 35 years I've been your personal bank. Let me remind you of the math. I don't need a lecture. $8,000 3 years ago for a business that never materialized. $6,000 13 years ago for a car you wrecked through negligence. $12,000 for your wedding, borrowed at 8% interest that I paid alone. $35,000 for Jennifer's education. Never one thank you, never 1 cent repaid. Family helps family. Family also respects family." My voice stayed level, educational. "You taught me that actions have consequences. I'm teaching you the same lesson." He threatened legal action. I gave him Stephen Parker's number and ended the call. Robert's final decision came later that month. I was present when he delivered it, sitting in his downtown office as his advisor, while the Benjamin family arranged themselves around the conference table. Richard and Patricia, Christopher and Jennifer, all of them tense, hopeful, desperate. "After comprehensive evaluation," Robert said, his tone professionally neutral, "I've decided not to proceed with investment in Benjamin Automotive Services." Richard's face crumbled. "Robert, please, we've implemented every change you required." "The changes weren't sufficient. I've observed continued family dysfunction, blame shifting, absence of genuine accountability. These are red flags for business partnerships. Christopher's voice was barely controlled. This is personal, not professional. Personal character is professional. Robert's eyes were cold. How you treat family reveals how you'll treat business partners. I invest in integrity. I don't see it here. I watched them process the death of their hopes. Without Robert's $200,000, Richard would have to sell at least one car wash at distressed prices, just to partially satisfy bank creditors. The business empire he'd spent decades building was finished. Later, Jennifer told me what Christopher said when they got home. "This is because of your father. If you hadn't been so attached to him, Robert would have invested." Even in failure, he couldn't accept responsibility. He blamed her, blamed me, blamed everyone but himself. That was when Jennifer finally understood what kind of man she'd married. Someone who saw her as an investment that hadn't paid off. Someone who wanted her to uninvite her own father from her wedding for practical reasons. Someone who never loved her at all. Late August arrived with warm afternoons and hints of autumn. Jennifer stood in my hallway wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, no makeup, hair in a simple ponytail. She carried the antique clock I'd given her at the wedding, now unwrapped. "Hi, Dad. Thank you for seeing me." We sat at my dining table. She placed the clock between us, ticking softly. "I was ashamed of you," she said, tears flowing. "I wanted to belong in Christopher's world so badly that I treated you like an embarrassment. The wedding seating, I proved that. I was a coward. Where's Christopher now? I filed for divorce 3 days ago. He never loved me. He thought I came from wealth. When that illusion crumbled, so did his interest. Michael arrived shortly after, equally humbled. I treated you like a bank, never paid you back, never thanked you. I'm ashamed it took losing my inheritance to understand. This wasn't revenge, I told them both. This was education. If we rebuild our relationship, it must be on different terms. Honest ones, respectful ones. Whatever it takes, Jennifer said. I'll prove it through actions, not words. By September, the new reality settled. Jennifer started a new job Robert helped arrange. Michael visited weekly. We rebuilt slowly on a foundation of honesty. The Benjamin family sold their car washes to pay debts. Christopher fled to Arizona. I moved to a better apartment, comfortable and safe. One evening, Robert and I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "How are things with Jennifer and Michael?" he asked. "Slowly improving. Different than before, but better. More honest." My phone buzzed. Jennifer. "First day. Thank you for everything, Dad." Then Michael. "Need anything for Sunday dinner?" I typed back. "Just bring yourself." For the first time in years, I felt complete peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because my relationships were finally real. My children had learned that dignity couldn't be purchased, that respect had to be earned. They'd learned it the hard way, but they'd learned. And I'd learned that standing up for yourself is never the wrong choice. This was justice, quiet satisfaction of being valued for who I was. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.